When men speak of war in these our Middle Ages, they speak of the clash of sword and spear, the thunder of hooves, the ringing of steel upon steel. Yet, I tell thee, there were perils upon the field far blacker than the swift stroke of death. Fates that crept into the hearts of soldiers long ere the trumpet called to battle. The dread of chains heavier than iron, the torment of a body broken yet breathing, the slow gnawing of hunger, the unseen pestilence that steals into camp by night, and the ruin of a man's good name, till even his kin look upon him with scorn. Herein thou shalt hear of the true terrors that haunted knight and footman alike. Mark these words well, and if thy heart be stirred by the telling, let thy hand grant alike, thy voice subscribe, and thy spirit stand ready for more tales of truth and steel. When men took to the field in those days of mail and banner, they feared not only the sharpened edge that might spill their life upon the ground. Nay, oftentimes a man's heart quailed more at the thought of living on in misery than of dying in glory. For to be struck down was an end, but to be struck and left breathing could be the beginning of a long and bitter doom. A crushed knee from the blow of a mace, the cruel severing of a hand by sword's bite, or the deep tearing of a spear through the shoulder. Such wounds robbed a man of his strength, his craft, and the means to earn his bread. Many a warrior feared that his fate would be to hobble in pain, to beg for alms, or to be a burden upon his kin. The earth yet keepeth the bones of such men, found in fields where battle once raged. Shattered limbs, cleft skulls, and bones bent awry tell the tale. Many blows in battle sought not the heart but the limb, for an enemy without an arm or leg could harm no more, yet still lived on to suffer. A wound upon the face was feared above most, for it bore its shame for all to see. A visage marred by blade or fire could steal a man's chance at marriage, honest employ, and good standing amongst his folk. The arrow too had its own cruelty. Bodkin heads, wrought sharp as a needle, could pierce through mail and lodge deep in bone. To draw them forth was agony, and often tore the flesh anew, leaving the limb stiff, the sinews weak, and the nerve dead. In such days the leech's art was small. Bones might be set and flesh sown, pain dulled with herbs or wine, yet the creeping rot of infection was a foe few could vanquish. Even a small cut might turn to fever and death within the moon's passing. Some few healers, like Hugh of Lucca and his brethren, sought new ways, washing wounds, binding them with wine, soaked cloth, and thus saved the lives of those fortunate to reach their hands. Yet most had naught but the iron brand to sear the hurt, or rough cloth to bind it, and comrades' aid upon the field. When the bones knit ill, a limb might twist forever, a joint fuse, and the sufferer walk in pain until his last day. To ride a steed, to wield a weapon, to till the soil, these tasks would be lost to him, and in a realm where each man's place was fixed, such loss was a grievous blow indeed. Knights of wealth might ransom themselves to comfort or live upon pension, but the poor footman had no such fortune. He must rely upon the charity of kin or the mercy of strangers, and if neither came, the street became his hall. After the clamour of battle, the camp turned to a place of groans and cries. Lines of the wounded waited upon the barber-surgeon, who would probe the wound with iron, cut away dead flesh, or scorch it with red, hot steel. The stench of burning flesh, the shrieks of men, and the knowledge that fever or the black rot might yet claim them made even the hardiest blanch. A blow to the head could steal more than strength of limb. Many returned with their minds clouded, their sight dim, their balance gone, or their memory like a torn parchment. Though they came home breathing, they were strangers in their own hearth. Manuals such as the Trogia Magna spoke of how to tend the splintered bone or the lodged arrow, yet with no clean tools nor knowledge of the small things that breed sickness, many failed, and oft it was the blunt weapon, a mace, warhammer, or poleaxe, that maimed without killing. Such blows might crush the bones and shatter the joints, leaving a man alive yet bound to lameness. Siege engines too brought such harm. Stones from a trebuchet, timbers from a shattered wall, or the scalding kiss of boiling oil could break a man beyond repair. And when the battle's smoke cleared, the danger lingered, foul water, filth, and close quarters turned small hurts into death traps. Men knew well that to survive might mean to live in pain without purpose and under the pity or scorn of others. Such thought was a shadow upon the heart long ere the first charge was sounded. Yet there was another fate that chilled the blood, a fate of chains, of slow days, and the will of other men. For to be taken captive was to be turned from warrior to coin, from free man to chattel. A knight or banneret, rich in land and name, might hope for ransom. His kin would sell fields, pledge harvests, and bargain with gold, while he lay in a tower cell, counting the passing seasons. Yet for the common soul, archer, pikeman, levy, there was no such market. He might be set to toil at siege works, haul timber and stone, dig trenches under the lash, or be sold to labour in some far field, or row the galley's oars till his hands bled salt, and his back was flayed by the whip. And there was the question of what a man might endure to give up his secrets. Few tortures were the grand devices that later tales would speak of. Most were plain and cruel, binding till the joints screamed, beating, hanging by the arms, the slow gnaw of hunger, the sting of cold nights without covering, the theft of sleep until the mind faltered. Such methods sought the names of comrades, the paths to a gate, the stores of grain, the number of men at arms. Sometimes the cruelty was done before the eyes of other prisoners, so that the will of all might be broken. And when the torment left no mark, the captive's worth for sale was not diminished. Some punishments were made to be seen, a nose or ear cut away to mark a deserter or spy, the right hand hewn from a bowman, or the eyes burned out from a captain whose leadership was feared. Such disfigured men were sent home not in mercy, but in message, so that all would speak of the fate that awaited those who stood against such foes. And when such a man returned to his village, the shame might cling to him more than the wound. Captives might be paraded through the market in chains, forced to kneel before a banner, stripped, shaved, or made to carry their own captured colours in mockery. Such ritual broke a man's standing, and in lands where honour was life, that was a second prison. The cells themselves were dark and foul, castle under crofts, town jails, monastic cells taken for war's use. Air was thin, straw was shared, lice crawled freely, and sickness walked the narrow spaces. Food was given in measure to worth. Noblemen might bribe for better, while the poor sold their cloak or pledged labour for crusts. Many left such places weaker than when they entered, even without a single blow. Parole was a slim chance. A knight might be freed upon his oath to gather ransom and not bear arms till it was paid. Yet if he broke that oath, dishonour would bar him from service, and comrades might shun him as an oath breaker. The ransom itself could weigh like a chain, driving men into harsher service to repay what their kin had given. Sometimes prisoners were made to serve as guides, carpenters, or drivers for the foe, and feared to be called traitor by their own should they ever return. When wars crossed faith's boundaries, the peril deepened. A man taken in such strife might be sold into bondage far from home, where no letter could reach, and no ransom be gathered. There was no surety in surrender, for terms might be granted one day and broken the next. Tales of mercy given to a garrison 1 month, and the slaughter of another the month following, travelled quickly, teaching men that to lay down arms was no certain safeguard. And so, upon the field, many a soldier feared chains more than the sword, for chains meant a long unmaking of the self, year upon year, until all that was left was a shadow, nor was it always in the clash of arms that fear was sown. The slow siege was a foe that gnawed without striking. Once the gates were shut, the measure of days was counted in loaves and barrels. Commanders would seal the granary and reckon how many mouths, how many days, how many rations till the last crumb. The besieger would burn the fields, block the roads, choke the rivers, raid the farms, so that even the boldest foray brought back less than before. Meat gave way to gristle, to the flesh of horses, to the rats and dogs that shared the walls with men. Salt, that guardian of meat, was soon spent, and without it stores spoiled. Water, too, was perilous, for the foe might foul the wells with filth or dead beasts. Ale, brewed thin to make the water safe, became a treasure when grain was low, and when it was gone, men drank from any source, courting the sickness that came with it. Hunger weakened arm and will alike. An archer might no longer draw his bow, a man-at-arms might falter upon the wall, and within the town prices soared, greed bred resentment, and the commander fought not only the foe beyond the wall, but discord within. Civilians and soldiers suffered differently. Sometimes the helpless were sent out in hope that the besieger would let them pass. Sometimes they were driven back, swelling the mouths to feed. Starvation made thieves of honest men. Black markets crept like shadows through the alleys. The signs of famine were plain, swollen gums, wounds that would not heal, a constant chill, minds clouded with irritability. Priests urged broth, healers urged herbs, but none could restore what was lost when there was naught left to eat. The foe knew well how to use hunger's bite. They roasted meat where the defenders could smell it, cast bread into the ditch in mockery, or fed prisoners in sight of the wall. The men within counted their grain and asked, "How much longer can we stand? Who will break first, us or them?" And when the enemy was not hunger, it was sickness. Armies feared pestilence as much as the spear, for it struck unseen and spared no rank. A camp poorly kept, latrines uphill from the water, offal left by the cook fires, could be hale at dawn and half dead by dusk. Dysentery, typhus, ague, pox, these were the foes that required no sword. Close quarters, beasts and men together, damp or heat, these bred death faster than battle. Commanders might order pits dug for waste, kitchens kept downwind, carcasses buried, water boiled. But discipline was a brittle shield, and one night's storm could flood the latrines into the wells. Horses and oxen left their filth, flies swarmed, and the sickness spread. Once it began, men fell from the ranks faster than they could be replaced. The physician's remedies were few, the apothecary's simples were but small comfort. A wound might be bound, but a fever needed clean water and rest, and both were dear in war. Winter did not spare the camp, it merely hid its filth till the thaw. Men huddled for warmth, coughed through the night, and sores opened on their frozen flesh. In summer, rot and insects claimed the food and made the water foul. Commanders moved their camps to higher ground to escape the miasma, but the march strained the men further. The reckoning was often cruel, 1,000 on the roll, yet but a few hundred fit for the line, and none felled by the enemy's charge. Yet perhaps the most feared ruin was neither of body nor of flesh, but of name. In these days honor was a man's coin. Without it no lord would hire him, no merchant would trust him, no I would stand by him. To flee the field, to abandon one's post, to refuse the call, these were felonies that could strip a man of land, of rights, of place. Rituals marked the fall, spurs cut away, sword broken, shield inverted, armor stripped before all. Such was the death of a man standing. Without honor, ransom was denied, parole withheld, credit refused. Desertion might cost a man's family their home, their market rights, their place in the guild. Marriage alliances crumbled. The stain of cowardice or treachery closed doors for a man's sons and daughters. The church too might cast him out, excommunicated for oath, breaking or sacrilege, denied sacraments, denied burial in consecrated ground. Within the company, honor was the bond that held the line. Men were tied in mutual pledges, shared loot and paired duties, so that to desert was to harm a comrade as well as oneself. Penalties for failure were sharp, loss of pay, flogging, or even death at the hands of one's own. Cowardice was not only running from the fight, it was disobeying orders, failing to cover a comrade's flank, or sowing panic with false tidings. Such acts were remembered in chronicles and on the lips of men at market, dogging the guilty for years. Even reckless valor could bring censure if it broke the line and endangered all. Communities struck the names of traitors from their rolls, razed their houses, defaced their arms. The shame lingered long after the battle was forgotten. Without honor, a man might not find hire, might not guard a caravan, might not serve in a retinue. He became less than a soldier, less than a man in the eyes of his world. Thus it was that many a warrior feared disgrace as much as death. For death might be swift and seal a name in glory. Disgrace lived on, a slow rot, poisoning all it touched. Thus have I told thee of the true dreads that walked with every man of war in the Middle Ages, of limbs shattered yet life left to linger, of chains and cruel captivity, of hunger's slow knife, of pestilence that crept like a thief, and of the loss of honor that cast a man into living shadow. These were the spectres that marched beside knight and footman alike, and they cared not for courage nor for skill, but struck where the armor could not guard. If these tales have stirred thy heart, and opened thine eyes to the perils beyond the sword's edge, then grant thy favor with alike, bind thy oath with a subscription, and keep thy watch for the next telling. For the past yet speaks, and the voices of those long dead have much to teach the living who would know the price of war, both in glory and in ruin.